It was just another dusty afternoon in the small Wild West town. Men were drinking in the saloon, women were hanging laundry, and kids were chasing each other down the dirt road. Then the sound of hooves cut through the air. Sharp, powerful. Not the sound of a farm horse, but something grand. A black carriage rolled into town, wheels gleaming, pulled by two fine horses. The town froze. Every head turned. Every voice went silent. The carriage door swung open, and out stepped her, a woman so stunning it felt like she didn't belong to this world of dust and whiskey. Her dress shimmered, her hair caught the sunlight, and beside her stood a little girl holding her hand. Gasps spread through the street. "Who is she?" someone whispered. The woman didn't answer. She didn't even look at the crowd. Her eyes searched for one man. And then she found him. Elias Walker, the lone cowboy, standing by the hitching post, arms crossed, silent as always. The woman walked straight toward him. The whole town followed with their eyes, holding their breath. She stopped right in front of him. And then, with a voice that carried across the silent street, she said words no one could believe. "Elias Walker, I want to marry you, right here, right now, in front of everyone." The town exploded in gasps. Whiskey glasses slipped from hands. The sheriff pulled down his hat. Men muttered, women covered their mouths, and children stared wide-eyed. A billionaire, single mother, proposing to the poorest cowboy in town? Nobody could make sense of it. Nobody saw it coming. But that was only the beginning. The street was dead silent. You could almost hear the wind stop as everyone waited for Elias's reply. The cowboy didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stood there, arms folded, his face carved from stone. Finally, after what felt like forever, he spoke. His voice was low, steady. "You must be mistaken, ma'am." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Mistaken? A woman like her, beautiful, powerful, rich beyond imagination, had just begged a poor rancher to marry her. And he refused? Clara's eyes softened, but her voice grew even more desperate. "No mistake, Elias Walker. I've come all this way for you. I don't care what the others think. I need you." Her little girl clutched her hand tighter, hiding behind her dress. The crowd leaned closer, hanging on to every word. Some men muttered, "He's crazy." Others whispered, "Why, him? Why this cowboy?" But Clara didn't care. She stepped closer. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, right there in the middle of the dusty road. "I'm not asking you for your money. I have more than I'll ever need. I'm asking you for something else. I'm asking you to protect me. Protect my daughter. Marry me, Elias. Please." The townsfolk gasped again. Now it wasn't just shocking. It was strange. A billionaire, begging a poor cowboy, not for wealth, but for safety. Elias's jaw tightened. He looked at her, then at the little girl hiding behind her. But he shook his head slowly. "I don't belong in your world," he said coldly. "And you don't belong in mine." Gasps, murmurs, whispers everywhere. The richest woman in the territory had been rejected, in front of the entire town. But Clara didn't back down. Her eyes glistened, her voice trembling as she whispered the words that would change everything. "If you say no, they'll find me. They'll find us. And then, Elias, we'll all be dead." The street went silent again. No one moved. No one spoke. The mystery had just deepened, and every soul in that dusty little town knew one thing. Whatever was happening between the billionaire widow and the poor cowboy was about to shake their world to its core. The crowd had gone silent, their curiosity burning hotter than the desert sun. Clara Beaumont, the richest woman they had ever laid eyes on, was standing in the dirt road, begging a cowboy to save her life. Elias's eyes narrowed. His hand hovered near the reins of his horse, ready to walk away. But something in Clara's trembling voice stopped him. He studied her for a long, tense moment. Finally, he spoke. "Who's coming after you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, she said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "The men who killed my husband." Gasps shot through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire. Killed? Her wealthy husband, the railroad tycoon, the banker. Wasn't it said he died in an accident? Clara's hands shook as she clutched her daughter close. "They want my fortune. They want my land, my railroads, everything. And if they can't control me, they'll kill me. They'll kill my little girl." Her daughter's small eyes peeked out from behind her skirt, wide with fear. Elias's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed cool. "And why me? Why come all this way? You've got men with guns in the city, sheriffs, marshals, bodyguards who'll protect you for a price." Clara shook her head. "No," she whispered, "I don't trust them. Not anymore. They're bought, paid off by the same men who want me dead." The saloon doors creaked as someone leaned out to listen. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, as if the truth in her words cut too close to home. Clara's voice broke as she looked straight into Elias's eyes. "You saved me once, Elias Walker. Do you remember? Years ago. On the stagecoach trail, you were the one who stopped those bandits before they dragged me away." The cowboy's eyes flickered, just for a second. The crowd murmured in shock. "So they had a past?" "I never forgot that night," Clara whispered. "I knew if anyone could protect me now, it would be you. Not for money, not for power, but because you're the only man I ever saw stand against the odds. And win." The silence grew heavy. Elias didn't move. His face gave nothing away, but deep down, the memory was clawing at him. The gunfire in the dark, the screams, the flash of fear in a young woman's eyes, and how he'd ridden into the storm to stop it. Now that same woman was standing in front of him, years later, begging him again. But this time, she wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking for his hand. And the whole town waited, breathless, to hear what the cowboy would say. The whole town waited, frozen. The billionaire widow had begged a poor cowboy to marry her. She'd revealed her husband had been murdered. She'd admitted killers were coming for her and her child. And now, every eye in that dusty street was fixed on Elias Walker. The cowboy stood silent for a long moment, the sun blazing down on his weathered hat, his eyes locked on Clara's. Then, slowly, he pushed off the hitching post and stepped toward her. The crowd leaned closer. Elias's voice was low, steady, like distant thunder. "You want me to marry you?" Clara nodded, her lips trembling. "Yes, for my daughter, for me, for safety. Please." The crowd held its breath. Would he say yes? Would he finally give in? Elias tilted his head, studying her as if searching her soul. Then, he said the last thing anyone expected. "I'll marry you, but only on one condition." The silence deepened. Clara's brows furrowed, desperate. "What condition?" Elias stepped closer, his voice firm. "You give it all up." Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked her dead in the eye. "The money, the land, the banks, the railroads, every last coin. Leave it all behind. If you want to stand by my side, you'll stand with nothing but the clothes on your back and the fire in your heart." Gasps tore through the crowd. The richest woman in the territory? Give up her fortune? For him? Clara's face went pale. "You're asking me to throw away everything?" Elias's jaw tightened. "I'm asking you to prove you ain't here just because you're scared. You want me? Then you take the life I live. Hard, simple, poor. No gold to weigh us down. No men with guns chasing your fortune. Just me. And the dust." The townsfolk couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some muttered, "He's lost his mind." Others whispered, "Or maybe he's the only man alive who can't be bought." Clara's hands shook. Her little girl clutched her skirt tighter, eyes wide, and in that burning silence, the question hung heavy in the air. Would she give it all up? For him? The town was still buzzing with whispers. Elias Walker, the poorest cowboy around, had just told the richest woman in the state to give up everything if she wanted to be with him. It didn't make sense. It didn't sound real. But Elias had spoken, with the kind of calm that couldn't be faked. Clara's lips parted as if to answer, but nothing came. Her hands trembled. Her little girl tugged on her dress. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Clara Beaumont looked unsure. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for her reply. Finally, she whispered, I don't know if I can." Gasps rippled through the street. Some women shook their heads. "She'll never give it up." A man at the saloon spat into the dirt. "A woman like that don't belong here. She belongs back in the city." But Clara wasn't listening to them. Her eyes stayed locked on Elias. "Do you understand what you're asking me?" she said, her voice breaking. "I built an empire. I fought men twice my size to protect it. That fortune is my daughter's future." Elias's gaze didn't waver. "I ain't asking for your empire. I'm asking for your heart. If you can't give that without the gold wrapped around it, then you don't want me. You want a bodyguard." His words cut deep. Clara's shoulders shook. Her daughter pressed, her face into her skirt, scared of the silence that followed. The crowd whispered louder now, voices rising like storm winds. Some pitied Clara. Others admired Elias. But all of them were hooked. And then the moment cracked. From the far end of town, 3 riders appeared. Dark hats, dark coats, rifles strapped to their backs. The crowd went quiet again. The sheriff stiffened, but didn't move. The riders didn't stop for anyone. They slowed their horses, scanning the town with eyes that sent a chill through the ewe. Dust. One of them spat into the dirt and sneered. "Well, well, looks like the Beaumont widow found herself a cowboy." Clara's face drained of color. She pulled her daughter closer. The whispers turned into gasps. The men who wanted her, dead, had found her. Elias's hand dropped to the worn revolver at his side. His voice was calm, steady, but sharp as steel. "Looks like your time's run out, ma'am. Now you'd better decide, riches or survival. The three riders slowed, their horses' eyes locked on Clara. The air turned heavy, as if even the wind knew trouble had arrived. "Mrs. Beaumont," one of them sneered. His voice was rough, like gravel under boots. "You've run far, but not far enough. Your late husband's business belongs to us now. And so do you." Clara's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. Her little girl buried her face in her mother's dress, trembling. The townsfolk scattered, ducking into doorways, pulling shutters closed. No one wanted to be caught in the storm that was about to break. Except one man, Elias Walker. He stepped forward, calm as ever, his hand resting on the worn revolver at his hip. His voice was steady, but cold enough to freeze the desert heat. "She don't belong to you," he said. "She don't belong to anyone." The riders laughed, a cruel, echoing laugh that made Clara flinch. "And who are you, cowboy?" the leader mocked. "A poor fool with a horse and a hat? You think you can stop us?" Elias didn't answer with words. He just narrowed his eyes, and the whole town felt the silence tighten. Then the leader jerked his rifle up. "Take her!" he barked. The moment snapped like lightning. Gunfire exploded, echoing through the dusty street. Windows shattered, horses reared, the town erupted in chaos. Clara screamed, pulling her daughter behind the water trough. Bullets tore through wood and glass, and in the middle of it all, Elias moved. Fast, precise, deadly. His revolver flashed once, twice. One rider toppled from his saddle, hitting the dirt hard. Another fired back, the bullet grazing Elias's shoulder. But he didn't flinch. He fired again, dropping the second rider. The third, wild-eyed, turned his horse to flee, but Elias was faster. One final shot, and the last rider crashed into the dust, silent. The town stayed frozen. Smoke curled from Elias's revolver as he lowered it, calm as if he'd just swatted a fly. Clara stared at him, breathless, clutching her daughter. The entire town peeked out from doorways, stunned. One cowboy, alone, had just stood against three killers, and won. But Elias didn't look proud. He holstered his gun, his voice low, almost like he was talking only to Clara. "This is just the beginning. More will come. You want to live? Then decide. The gold, or me?" Clara's heart pounded. Her fortune, her empire, her power, everything she had built. And this cowboy was asking her to burn it all for a life of dust, sweat, and survival. The choice hung heavy in her chest, and every soul in that little town waited to see what she would do next. The smell of gunpowder still hung heavy in the air. The three hired killers lay lifeless in the dust, and the whole town stared at the scene, stunned into silence. Elias stood tall, revolver holstered, his shirt torn and bleeding where the bullet had grazed him. He didn't show pain. He didn't even look at the bodies. His eyes were fixed only on Clara. She was still clutching her daughter, trembling, but her gaze was locked on him. "You saved us," she whispered. "You could have walked away, but you didn't." "Why?" Elias's jaw tightened. "I don't save people for money. I save 'em if they're worth it. But I won't chain myself to a fortune that's cursed. You want me, Clara? Then you leave it all. Right here, right now." The words cut through the silence like a knife. The townsfolk gasped. A few men muttered, "She'll never do it." Others whispered, "If she does, she's the bravest woman I've ever seen." Clara looked down at her little girl, clinging to her skirt. Tears welled in her eyes. Her whole life, all the power, the land, the railroads, the endless riches, flashed through her mind. And then, slowly, she reached into her satchel. When her hand came out, it held a leather-bound packet. Deeds, contracts, titles to the empire her enemies were killing for. The crowd leaned closer. Breaths held tight. Clara raised the packet high and, with a trembling hand, struck a match. The flame caught, small at first, then growing, crackling, hungry. "No," someone whispered, but Clara's face was set, strong, unshaken. She dropped the packet into the dirt. The fire spread quickly, devouring the papers, curling the ink, turning a fortune into ashes. The crowd gasped in unison. The richest woman in the territory had just burned her empire to the ground. Clara's voice carried over the crackle of the fire. "I choose my daughter. I choose freedom. And I choose you, Elias Walker." The whole town went still. Some couldn't believe what they'd seen. Others looked at Elias with awe, realizing no amount of gold could ever bend him. Elias's eyes softened, just a flicker. He gave her the slightest nod. "Then, you're mine," he said quietly. "Not as a billionaire, not as a widow, just as a woman who finally chose her own path." Clara pulled her daughter close, tears rolling down her cheeks. But for the first time in years, she was smiling, and the town knew they had just witnessed something they would tell for generations. The day a billionaire burned her fortune for the love of a poor cowboy. The fire still smoldered in the dirt, ashes swirling up into the hot desert air. The crowd hadn't moved, their eyes wide, their voices hushed. They had just seen a billionaire burn her empire for a cowboy. Now, what would come next? Elias stood there, silent as always, dust and blood on his shirt. Clara looked at him, eyes red from tears, but steady with resolve. Her daughter held her hand, leaning against her, no longer trembling. Then Clara whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud, "So, will you have me?" For the first time, the cowboy's lips curved into the smallest, rarest of smiles. He tipped his hat low. "Reckon I will." The words spread like wildfire. "Did you hear that?" someone gasped. "He said yes!" The sheriff cleared his throat, stepping forward awkwardly. "Well, we ain't got no grand halls or city chapels here, but the church bell still rings, and the preacher's sober enough." Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the heavy air. In no time, word traveled faster than smoke. The town gathered in the little wooden church at the end of the street. Candles flickered, benches creaked, and whispers filled the air. The poorest cowboy in the county was about to marry the richest woman they'd ever seen. Clara walked down the aisle, not in silk or jewels, but in the same dust-stained dress she'd arrived in. Her daughter carried a small wildflower bouquet, plucked right from the fields outside town. Elias stood at the front, tall, rugged, his hat in his hands. He didn't wear fine clothes. He didn't need them. He was the same as he'd always been. Simple, steady, unshaken. When the preacher asked if she would take this man, Clara's voice rang out, clear and strong. "I will." And when he asked Elias, the cowboy simply nodded. "I will." The crowd erupted in cheers, hats tossed in the air, boots stomping the wooden floor. The saloon pianist struck up a tune. off-key but joyful, and for the first time in longer than anyone could remember. Elias Walker smiled. Clara kissed him, and the whole town knew this wasn't a marriage of wealth or convenience. It was something rarer, something real. The richest woman in the territory had chosen to live as poor as the cowboy she loved, and the poor cowboy had finally let someone into the heart he'd kept locked away. But as the bells rang and the crowd cheered, a shadow still lingered. Because though Clara's fortune had burned to ash, the men who killed her husband had not been stopped. Not yet. And soon, Elias's own secret past would rise from the dust. A truth that would shock even Clara. The little church bell had barely stopped ringing. The town was still buzzing, folks spilling into the street, cheering, laughing, shaking their heads at the miracle they'd just witnessed. The richest widow in the territory had married the poorest cowboy in town. It was a story they'd tell their children, and their children after that. Clara held her daughter in one arm, her new husband's hand in the other. For the first time in years, she felt safe. For the first time in forever, she felt free. But Elias Walker, he didn't look like a man celebrating. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the horizon, his hand never straying far from his gun. Even in victory, the cowboy was restless. That night, as the town quieted and the stars spread across the black sky, a rider appeared. He wasn't one of the killers. He wasn't even a stranger. He carried a sealed letter, yellowed with dust, the edges worn. He handed it to Clara with a bow of his head. "This was left for you," he said, "by someone who knew you'd be here." Clara's brow furrowed as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the page and widened. It wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to Elias Walker. Her hands trembled as she read aloud. To Elias Walker, heir of the Walker Mining Company. You can run from your fortune, but you can't bury it forever. The room went still. Clara looked at him, shocked. Elias, what is this? The cowboy's jaw tightened. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, with a sigh heavy as the desert wind, he finally spoke. I was rich once, richer than you. My family owned half the mines west of the river, but greed killed 'em. Greed poisoned it all. I left it behind. Swore I'd never touch another dollar of that cursed wealth. I buried the name, the land, the fortune. Everything. Clara's lips parted in disbelief. All this time, you weren't just a poor cowboy. Elias shook his head. I was a fool who learned the hard way. Money don't buy peace. It don't buy love. It buys death. His eyes locked on hers, steady and true. That's why I made you burn yours, so you'd never have to learn the way I did. Clara's heart thundered in her chest. The man she thought had nothing, had once had everything, and the secret he carried made her choice even heavier. But as she held his hand, as her daughter nestled safely at her side, Clara knew the truth. It didn't matter if he was once rich, or if she had once been powerful. They had chosen each other. And in that dusty Wild West town, beneath the endless stars, the story spread. The richest widow and the poorest cowboy had married, only for the world to discover that the poorest cowboy had once been richer than them all.